Hi, my name is Dr. Jason J. Campbell, and I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my videos. In this video, I'm actually going to complete Chapter 1 of Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I've been going through and doing an analysis, critical analysis of Chapter 1, and I will be completing Chapter 1 in this video. The subsequent video will begin Chapter 2. I think there are 4 chapters in the book, so with this lecture, I will complete my analysis of Chapter 1. Again, if this is the first time you're watching this series, I have provided the notes that I'm using as a PDF. All that you need to do is to click the banner at the bottom of the video or to click the link in the description field, and you can get the notes that I have. My suggestion is for you to print out the notes and write your own notes as you listen along to the lectures. With that, let's begin the final section, Section 7 of Chapter 1. Alright, so this is Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Alright, and this is 1.7. Alright, what we're going to talk about in this section is the process of liberation. There isn't much I have left to do in this video, so this video won't be as long, the series won't be as long because there isn't that much left in chapter 1. So at the tail end of Chapter 1, Freire talks about the process of liberation, right? And we know now, at this point in the discussion, 50 videos in, what that process is, right? We have an understanding of how the individual and the group that is oppressed goes through this process of liberation, right? So we're going to be discussing the process of liberation. Okay, the first step in this process, right? And I won't actually say the first step, but a step in this process of liberation is trust, right? We spoke in the last discussion that there has to be a sense of trust, right? And the sense of trust is twofold, right? If we have an oppressor, right? An oppressor who is now a convert, and then we have members of the oppressed community, right? We have an oppressor who is now a convert and members of the oppressed community. There has to be a level of trust here, right? So there has to be trust between between members of an oppressed group, right? So we're talking about trust between members of an oppressed group, but we're also talking about the trust that the convert has with members of the oppressed group, right? So this convert, the person who used to be an oppressor, right, now who is acclimating him or herself with the plight of the oppressed, this individual also needs to establish trust, right? Obviously, as we've said in previous videos, and Freire says in the text himself, this relationship of trust between members of the oppressed group, prima facie, it's important, right? Necessarily important to have this trust between members of the oppressed group if we're going to talk about liberation. If the oppressed group members don't trust each other, there is no hope for liberation, right? There has to be trust established between members of the oppressed group in order for us to talk about this aspect of liberation. The process of liberation also requires proper praxis, right? In the previous video series, I talked about what praxis is, and praxis is a combination of 3 things. The first thing that praxis involves is critical reflection, or just reflection in general, right? And what is reflection? Reflection is sort of abstract thought, theoretical understanding of, argumentation, or the motives justifying, the motives grounding a theory, right? And that theory is what's driving this action, right? So, for example, if I hope to be a revolutionary, my revolutionary ideals have to be grounded in some theory, particularly, let's say, liberation theory, right? Whatever it might be. So the first thing that we need in praxis, and I'll actually write this down. So praxis And again, this is review. First thing that we need is reflection. The next thing that we need is critical dialogue. Right? We need to be engaged in critical dialogue. This dialogue, D-I-A-L, this dialogue is and becomes the foundation for establishing trust between members of the oppressed group, right? It's through dialogue, it's through an exchange of information that we recognize our shared circumstance, right? The plight of our oppression. We recognize this through our shared dialogue. And it's in sharing that dialogue that we can then usurp the power of the overlord, the oppressor, right? And reclaim our liberation. Also, it's important to recognize that the dialogical exchange between those who have been converted, right? Converted oppressors is important as well, right? In the relationship between, I had a viewer ask me, does this concept of, and can this concept of pedagogy of the oppressed apply to, 6 through 12 high school instruction, middle school instruction? Absolutely it does. It definitely pertains to pedagogy, sort of educational pedagogy. Freire does make a distinction between what he calls sort of an educational method, which he doesn't really, he doesn't like too much. In the end of chapter 1, he sort of bashes the traditional educational method, and he talks about a sympathetic pedagogy, right? The distinction being in this critical dialogue, I don't construct my relationship with the other in a sense that I know and you don't know, that I'm active and you're passive, and I've discussed this in more detail in previous videos, right? So the idea is we want to make sure in a critical dialogue that both people, both members are participating in the conversation, both members are contributing to the development. And if we're in a classroom setting and we're talking about how would this unfold in a classroom, we'll see in a few minutes how this unfolds. I don't want to jump the gun because I'm going to actually address that point, how it unfolds in the classroom in a few minutes. Okay. Bullet point number 3, revolutionary wisdom, right, and this is his phrase, revolutionary wisdom must come from oneself in order to be authentic, right? This idea of revolutionary wisdom, right, what we recognize is that out of the oppressed group, right, out of the oppressed group, there's going to be a leader, right, this revolutionary leader. And it's not that the revolutionary leader is at a higher status than other members of the oppressed. The revolutionary leader is obviously oppressed just like other members. The revolutionary leader is not in a more prestigious or a better situation than the oppressed. The revolutionary leader has been identified because he or she has assumed the responsibility, right? Assumed the responsibility of leading the oppressed population out of their subjugation, out of their oppression. Freire specifically talks about the sense of responsibility that's attributed to the revolutionary leader, and what we'll see are some of the limitations that Freire places on the revolutionary leader, right? What the role of the revolutionary leader is in relationship to the liberation of the population of oppressed people as such. Okay, next point, point 4, liberation must be a product of the subjective rather than the objectivity of the oppressed, right? So that this process of liberation must be a product of subjectivity rather than objectivity. And the question is, well, what does that mean, right? So liberation, put it right here, liberation must be the product of subjectivity rather than objectivity.